In this video, we are going to be going over the 10 best, most broken cards in the One Piece trading card game, and I think the list might surprise you guys, and let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Hey you!
Me?
Yes, you. Are you a good player? Do you have your Nats invite or are hoping to get your Nats invite? MoonlightTCG.com offers an exclusive tournament to only players who have gotten top cut at big events. Iron sharpens iron. Moonlight TCG's Pro Circuit tournament offers insanely good prize support and is officially judged and streamed by yours truly. Check out the link below to sign up. MoonlightTCG.com, the place for everything One Piece. Starting out at number 10, we have the Sabo Blocker, the 5-cost Sabo Blocker. This card absolutely warps certain matchups and metas, and it literally has no downside. It has a 1k counter, it's a blocker, it protects all of your cards from being KO'd, it cycles your hand, and can be abused and recycled in certain decks, like, for example, any deck that plays Rebecca can get back a Sabo, any deck that used to play Mon Cherie could get back a Sabo, or a Rebecca to get back the Sabo. It was very easy to not only recycle it, but abuse it and cycle your deck. It makes your deck a whole lot consistent, especially with decks that are, meta relevant in the past few sets. There are no decks that do not play Sabo or a single copy of Sabo. Look at Black Yellow Luffy, Gecko Moria, Sakazuki, Rob Lucci. There are no black decks that do not play this card. Its sole existence auto-wins you into specific black decks that do not have any other types of removal other than KO, and sometimes it's almost impossible to go for lethal in certain situations because it being a 5-cost 6k body, it is a little bit awkward to get rid of without a whole lot of Dawn investment. At number 9, we have the Stun Doffy, the 10-cost Doflamingo. It is one of the most devastating cards in the game if it's played back-to-back, but even just one can be such a massive tempo swing in your favor because what it does is it's almost like a pseudo turn skip. It locks 3 of your characters in place if you get the maximum amount of value from it, and in the late game, if you skip your entire turn and have a 10k body attacking into you the next turn, well, that's a recipe for disaster, and a lot of times you're not able to win the game. The only reason this card is not as high up on the list as I would like is because green hasn't been that great since the history of the game first came out, and it's not very searchable with an actual good searcher. So for example, good searchers are Dodon, Nami, Bonnie, but this is a Baby 5 searcher that can search for it, which hasn't really been used in a whole lot of decks, and Baby 5 doesn't really have a whole lot of great cards it can search for other than this card and a 2k counter, so its playability hasn't been the greatest, and its meta relevance hasn't been that great since it was released back in set 4, but whenever decks do play it that are green and they can actually use this card, it is very devastating, and that is the only reason it is more further down on the list than other cards. Number 8, we have Rush Ace, the 7-cost Whitebeard Pirate character. What this card does is minus 3,000 power no matter what to 2 different characters, but if your leader is Whitebeard Pirates, it gains Rush. Now this card is no longer as meta relevant as it once was, not even close, but the impact it had when Whitebeard was dominating for 3 sets in a row, set 2, set 3, and set 4, was massive. So Whitebeard doesn't play a whole lot of characters per turn, and you can either flood the board or play big bodies to contest their life and pressure them down, but Ace made it so once those characters turned sideways, they were gone. There was no saving them, especially when Moby Dick was around. It was a Rush 9k character that minus 3,000 power to a character, so that character was definitely dead. Even now, it's more than likely dead, and if not, you're gonna have to waste a ton of cards to be able to protect it, and Whitebeard can probably survive another turn or 2 to protect it to win the game. So this card was a massive tempo swing, and while I do think it will make a resurgence later on in the game, especially with Marco being released and then decks, in the future that have Whitebeard Pirates tag that can use red cards, I think it will come back into the meta and show you guys how and why it was so feared back in the early parts of the game and possibly in the future, because this card has an effect that is so good, I don't think it will be replaced anytime soon, and it's such a massive tempo swing that any deck that can play it will play it, and it is very good when it comes out. At number 7, we have 10-cost Big Mom, everyone's least favorite card. While this card is a little bit further down on the list than I thought it would have been when I first started making it, it's still one of the most frustrating cards in the game, especially when chained back to back. Now the issue with this card is not only is it very searchable with Pudding and Parasparrow, but it also is able to be drawn into with just your Mulligan hand or Shirahoshi to help you draw 3 cards into your deck to find the 10-cost Big Mom. The problem with 10-cost Big Mom is because it is so searchable and because it is so easily accessed and obviously a 4 of, that if you don't pressure them down, any yellow deck that plays it, then by turn 5, or by turn 4, they're going to play this card, or maybe turn 5, and they are just going to do a 2-life swing every single turn with just the effect alone. And if the character survives, which it most likely does because it's a 10 cost, it's attacking into 12k into something with no Dawn invested. It is one of the most frustrating cards in the entire game, and the only reason it is lower on this list is because 1, yellow hasn't been the greatest deck since the deck came out, and 2, it is leader lock, so not all yellow decks can play it, and Enel has been just as good, if not a little bit better, than Katakuri over the past couple sets, which is why this card is not as high up on the list as other cards that you'll see. Number 6 on the list is Red Green Law, the Leader. Now this is actually our first leader that is on this list, and it had one of the hardest ban lists ever, and it barely missed a beat. This leader alone got the Searcher Nami and Searcher Dodon banned for like 3 weeks, but during those 3 weeks there were a couple tournaments in set 4.5 and Law was still topping. Even though, despite me thinking that deck wasn't very good after the ban, it was still doing really well in the hands of good players because it still generates so much value. It can generate up to 6 Dawn per turn, and it's really easy to pull off. It's not like you need specific cards to make it happen. You just need 5 characters on the board, and with the amount of times you search and generate advantage, this deck can easily get 5 characters on the board and then generate 6 extra Dawn per turn, maybe 2 or 3 extra cards per turn, on top of, playing very defensively, having access to aggressive strategies, and having access to card advantage. It is one of the most diverse decks in the game that you can play. And the fact that it can be played so many different ways makes it so difficult to beat because it can win in so many different ways. And it also, in set 7, has won a regional. Despite Lucci, its worst matchup, being very relevant and one of the best decks in the game, it still pushed past Lucci. It beat 2 of them on the way to being a regional champion. This deck is very good. It was dominating just like Whitebeard in the past, and it deserves number 6 on the list. I wish I could put it further, but there are certain cards that are a little bit better than Red Green Law, which we'll talk about right now. Coming in at number 5, we have an insurmountable force. We'll talk about another insurmountable force later on in this game, but this card alone has just dominated when it's been able to be played. And we are talking about 8-cost Kid. I don't know if I said it already, but 8-cost Kid. This card by itself made my brother, who was a notorious blue Doffy player in set 1, literally quit the game because there was no answer for it. And now, 6 sets later, or I guess 7 sets including EBO1, there are sometimes still no answer for this card. You can protect it with blockers, you can protect it from being KO'd by effects with Rosinante, the 2-cost blocker. It's an 8k character, so it's hard to kill by battle. Depending on draw, sometimes you just don't have an answer for it when it comes out. Or if you had an answer for it, you had to use it on other threats earlier in the game. And now when it comes out, when you have 0 life and you think you're about to win the game, now you have a wall that you just cannot get around. It has been abused in every single meta relevant green deck. Also been used as a tech card in Red Green Law sometimes, which is number 6 on this list, which we just talked about Red Green Law. It has been so good and so consistently good in every green deck that it deserves number 5 on this list. And there's actually only one card that is not a leader that is ahead of 8-cost Kid on this list. Number 4, we have Sakazuki, the Leader. I know you guys are gonna be like, number 4, what? Rest in peace, my boy Sakazuki. Let's talk about Sakazuki. This deck has the second highest ceiling in the game, behind Red Purple Law, which, spoiler alert, will be the next one on this list. It is also the second banned leader in the history of One Piece. Funny story, I was talking to my brother, the one that was a blue Doffy player, about blue, and he was like, can you imagine if we got a blue-black leader, how good that would be? Funny enough, we got a blue-black leader, and he was really, really, really freaking good. Really, really, really good. With the cost reduction and bottom decking mechanic and its versatility, it was just a massive force that was hard to beat. It was easier to beat than you think, but it was really hard to beat a lot of the times. Not only did it win the world championship, but the top 3 players in Worlds all played Sakazuki, and they also played different styles of Sakazuki. Some played Kaido, some didn't. Some played Sanji's Pilaf, some didn't. Some played Kuzan, some didn't. Actually, I think all of them played Kuzan, but still, there's a lot of different ways you can build it with the same result. It was just dominating the top cut. Now, while Sakazuki did not win any major tournament in North America, which is where I'm from, during set 5, it did win Worlds, which was set 5. It didn't win anything in North America, and in set 6 it exploded in popularity and dominance after Gecko Moria, the card, was released, and it made it so black was just way over the top. And Sakazuki's a consistent effect to draw cards and be highly versatile made the deck really difficult to beat because it had a lot of options to beat you, and also made balancing cards in the future very difficult with blue and black. So for that reason it is banned, and for that reason it is number 4 on the list. Number 3 on the list, I spoiled it earlier, is Red Purple Law, the Leader. Now, you know Red Purple Law is bad when people in the East start complaining about bans. These are the most resilient people you'll ever meet. They don't complain about anything, and when they want a leader gone, they've had enough. This deck is a force. Now, Red Purple Law is a little bit different than Whitebeard, where it dominated immediately. Whitebeard dominated immediately. It was a little bit of a slow burn for Red Purple Law. It took a couple sets, 2 or 3 sets, to acquire some generic support to make the deck better. It had to get Reiju, it had to get Captain Kid, it had to get Kid Killer, had to get 2K counter Sanji, 2K counter Black Maria. But once it got its support, it is arguably the deck with the least amount of counterplay in the entire game, and it has access to every facet of the game. It can do literally everything, very similar to Sakazuki, but with the highest ceiling in the game, because it is consistently a walking bottom deck card. It's a walking bottom deck mechanic, because unlike Sakazuki, where you needed to find cost reduction and KO cards or bottom deck cards, it is a bottom deck card. So all you need to find is power reduction. So all you need to find is one card with power reduction, and you can bottom deck characters in the game. That is a huge problem. Also, the issue with this is it can flood the board like Rush Zoro and be very aggressive. It can draw cards with Queen and Missile Sunday and Reiju, and it can also be very defensive. It plays so many blockers. It is just so good. And the worst part is its leader effect was supposed to Dawn minus you enough to make it a big downside, a deterrent for using your leader effect every turn. But with the amount of ramp cards we have in this game, especially in set 8 with Pudding coming out, this deck doesn't, and obviously Black Maria, this deck doesn't even minus Dawn anymore. It just does everything for free. If I made this video in set 8, this leader would probably be number 1 on the list, but because I am in the Western meta, and set 7, it's not incredibly dominant just yet, it's still very good. It's just not there just yet. There's 2 more cards that I think are just better because we've had either more time with them or they are just more impactful, which we'll talk about right now. Number 2. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but it's going to be Whitebeard. Whitebeard, people might be so surprised with it being so high up on this list, but this deck has won either one event or multiple events in every single set, every single format since the deck came out. It won in set 2, it won a bunch in set 2, it won a bunch in set 3, it won a bunch in set 4, it won a couple times in set 5, it won a couple times in set 6. All we need it for is to win one time in set 7, which someone's going to figure out the sauce and then make Whitebeard good again. This deck is so good at doing what it does, and it's hard to counterplay what it does, because what it does is just beat the crap out of you with 6k bodies. It makes it hard for you to actually attack into. Their characters are obviously all have rush, so they speed you out of the game, they tempo you out of the game, and if you try to kill them before they try to kill you, well, then they have radical beam, they have guard point, they have 2k counters, they have blockers, and you just can't do it. There is very little counterplay. In fact, Pudding is one of the only cards, Pudding, Blocker Law, and the Isho are like the only hand rip cards in the entire game that are actually relevant. And in set 6, a Whitebeard played, I interviewed this Whitebeard player, shout out to Long, he played against a RP Law in the finals, and he got blocker lawed like 5 times and still won. It is amazing what this deck can do, and it is so hard to beat, and it has been so dominant for so long, and the red color pool is so good at being so aggressive. Sorry, I said so many times, but this deck deserves to be number 2 on the list, and the only reason it is not number 1 on the list is because we have the best card to ever be printed at number 1, which we'll talk about right now. At number 1, last but not least, I think you guys probably expected this point. I mean, if we got through this whole video and you don't know what number 1 is, then I'm a little bit surprised. But we got 8 cost Gecko Moria, the character. This card single-handedly makes any black deck semi-relevant because it can just play Gecko Moria, and it makes good black decks borderline unfair. Gecko is abused in every single meta black deck or black combination deck in the game. Its most notorious since its release have been Black Yellow Luffy, which can generate 22 Dawn worth of cards, Sakazuki, which could generate obviously a whole lot of cards and KO stuff, or bottom deck stuff with, you know, the Mirakuma sword combo. We have Gecko Moria the Leader, Rob or Lucci can also generate like 21 to 22 Dawn worth of cards off of Spandine and Rebecca and Helmeppo and all these cards. And it even saw play in decks like Red Black Sabo and Black Yellow Linlin. This card is absolutely insane. It can eviscerate an entire board and set up multiple bodies that can attack into you for lethal the very next turn if you don't get rid of it. It feels like this is an absolute blowout card, but not just a blowout card. If you have multiple of them, it feels like you cannot win the game. It feels impossible to win the game. And the only reason black is not tier 0 is because it's impossible to actually search for Gecko Moria right now. Now, funny enough, Sakazuki could have been searched by the Sengoku in set 7, but in the West, they banned Sakazuki before we can actually search for Gecko Moria. So that is massive right there. This card right here, since it came out in set 6, has completely warped every single meta that we've been a part of. It warped set 6, it warped EBO 1, and right now it's warping set 7. Because if you play this card, it can absolutely dominate any deck that comes out. If you just see this card or multiple of this card, it feels like you cannot lose the game. And for that reason, and it being able to just be abused in every single deck, and it having access to basically just play any character that, you know, with any leader that has black in, is just absolutely insane. And this card is very, very, very likely to be banned in the future, or at least limited in some way. Let me know what you guys think about this list, and I will see you guys in my next video. Peace.